Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's PeopleCert Skill Up webinar titled How PRINCE2 Helps Drive Sustainability. I'm your host, Bonnie Schneider, and I am the sustainability contributor to the Techstrong group. I'm also the author of the new book, Taking the Heat, How Climate Change Affects Your Mind, Body, and Spirit, and What You Can Do About It. Well, today we're going to be diving deep into the world of PRINCE2 and its pivotal role into driving sustainability in various projects and organizations. We're going to explore the methodologies, benefits, and how it all aligns with the broader goals of sustainable development. Now, I would like to introduce our esteemed panelists today, Dr. Joel Carboni. Dr. Carboni is the foremost global expert on sustainable project management. As the visionary behind the Green Project Management, Dr. Carboni's innovative tools and methods have set the standards in green practices, and they've also been adopted worldwide by leading corporations, organizations, and even governments. A proud graduate of Ball State University here in the US with a PhD in Sustainable Development and Environment, Dr. Carboni boasts a diverse 25-year career in project management covering sectors from government to academia. A renowned speaker on sustainability and project management, Dr. Carboni's impact spans over 55 countries. We are honored to have him with us today. Dr. Carboni, welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Great. Well, let's get started. I know we already have a nice amount of people that are probably eager to ask questions. I'm going to first ask you a question, and I encourage everyone that's joining us on this webinar, type in on the chat for your questions for Dr. Carboni, and I will ask him them as soon as I get them. But for our first question, Dr. Carboni, from your viewpoint, how would you describe how implementing sustainable practices are reshaping the role of project management?
That's a good question. From my perspective, the push for sustainable practices is not just reshaping, but revolutionizing the role of the project manager, and more so, the project profession. Consider that project work constitutes nearly half of global GDP, translating to an astronomical figure of approximately 43 trillion US dollars. This profound influence manifests in our everyday lives. The indispensable smartphones we use, the cars we commute in or trains we commute in, the infrastructure we depend on, and the shelters we call home and workplace. Yet for decades, if not longer, the legacy of our project work has too often been overlooked in its ramifications on society and the environment. The quickest route to meaningful global transformation lies in our redefining how we conceive, develop, and deliver products and services. This understanding has driven at least our endeavors at GPM for the past 14 years. We view sustainability not as merely an obligation, but as an unparalleled opportunity through the lens of project management.
Sounds like you've had a vast experience with 55 countries. Before we get into the PRINCE2 part, I'm also just wondering from your own viewpoint, since you've had such a long storied career, how have you seen these trends evolve? I mean, we were just talking before we started that there's a growing interest in this topic, and it's only escalating. I wrote a book about climate change, and my background is a meteorologist covering these disasters. And in my career, I've seen an increase in the size and scope of extreme weather events. And I'm wondering what your viewpoint is on that.
It's interesting. When we launched GPM back in 2009, we were told you don't belong here. Sustainability, that's operations. And now it's mainstream. We partner with every project management organization out there because the reality is climate change is affecting projects. It's affecting our timelines. It's affecting our work. I mean, take a look at the hurricanes. How many projects had to stop this week in the US because of extreme weather conditions? The droughts, the wildfires, they're out of control. So how do we accommodate those in our projects? And how do projects contribute to exacerbating those? How are we making it worse? And so that's one thing we have to really understand is the impact of our work. And so as these trends continue to grow over the years, we're seeing more and more people wake up to the fact that, we may be contributing to some of this, and how can we stop that? And so that's really where we come into play.
That makes perfect sense. Can you explain how PRINCE2 systematic and controlled approach fits into the broader scheme of sustainability initiatives?
Yeah, so I think PRINCE2's strength lies in its structured yet flexible framework. It's continuous monitoring, management by exception or tolerances, which I understand that sustainability is now one of in the new to be released version, and stage gate evaluations. So these align with sustainability's iterative needs by ensuring that projects stay in line with overarching strategic sustainability goals. PRINCE2 can ensure sustainability is not just an afterthought, but an integral component. PRINCE2 can actively amplify sustainability success and integration if you embed our P5 standard and the sustainability map using our impact analysis tool. It amplifies it even more.
That makes sense. We're still looking to get some questions in from our audience, and it's interesting because we have people from all over the world, the UK, Africa, and the Middle East, and everybody is talking about sustainability. It really doesn't matter where you live in the world, we're all affected, and we're all looking to have more information on sustainability. Can you share with us, in your experience, some examples of how you've used PRINCE2, the controlled systematic approach? How does it fit into these broader scheme of sustainability initiatives in terms of any just experiences that you've had?
So while it's true that I've not directly employed PRINCE2 as a project manager recently, I did so when I had more hair. I haven't had the title of project manager in many years, but in my extensive experience with sustainability projects in other capacities, it's given me unique insights into how PRINCE2 principles can be leveraged for these initiatives. So, in fact, many of the professionals I've mentored and collaborated with have successfully integrated sustainability into PRINCE2's approach for their projects. For instance, one memorable project involves creating a green infrastructure in an urban setting. The team used PRINCE2's structured framework to ensure that the project aligned with overarching environmental goals, engaged stakeholders from diverse backgrounds, and managed impacts using our P5 standard and P5 impact analysis tool. It's a testament to the adaptability and relevance, really, of PRINCE2's methods, and even in sectors where they might not be traditionally employed. So we use management by exception in almost everything we evaluate for our clients. The P5 impact analysis is in itself a form of it. We really say a project can't proceed unless an identified risk with a value of whatever is mitigated during each project stage, and that fits in nicely.
Well, we just got a question, and I'm going to read it to you now. It is from participant 192, asking, what are some of the biggest struggles you faced when implementing sustainability with project management? Good question.
I'll tell you what the biggest struggle is. It's called the sustainability premium, or we can't afford that. Because what happens is when you get a business case and you are given, the marching orders to proceed, to start working, oftentimes sustainability is an afterthought or something you discover along the way, and you go, oh, there's a problem here. How do we address that? And they go, well, we can get the work done and kind of address it, or we can really address it. But if you really address it, it might cost more. Now, here's where the rubber meets the road. Organizations that are for purpose and want to always do the right thing are willing to spend that extra money because they realize that when organizations focus on sustainability, they're 30% more profitable across the board. Because what happens is you're able to save money in the long run, to be more efficient, penetrate more markets, and also reduce costs. So that's one of the challenges we always have to overcome and explain that, yes, it may be an upfront investment, but the returns are twice as good. And so that's part of it, is overcoming that falsity that there's a premium. I actually wrote a blog on this. It's on our blog site if you guys want to check it out. But yeah, that's one of the big ones. The other one I would say is that project managers tend to be command and conquer, like do what you're told, and are not strategic enough. And sustainability is so wide reaching, and everything from GHG emissions to human rights and everything in between. So how do we do it all, right? And so we've actually boiled it down into a step-by-step process you can follow to uncover roughly 49 different aspects of sustainability in your project work. And so that's available to you guys. There's a link in there for free.
Oh, that's great. Everybody that's on the webinar, you're getting a free link. I encourage you to check it out because Dr. Carboni is really the best expert, and anything he's able to give you, I would take advantage of that. Our next question is from participant 246, and his question is, does sustainability impact on delivering more successful projects?
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
Oh, right, it just disappeared. Does sustainability impact on delivering more successfully the projects that this
Yes.
one, maybe the grammar's a little off, but you can.
I think I get the point. Yeah, it does. Because
okay.
what we have to do, in project management, we have to expand what success means. Is it adhering to time, cost, and scope? Or is it risk, value, benefits? Or is it also positive impacts to society and the environment? I would argue it's all of them. But how do you put that all together, right? So it's important that that every time we do a project, we look at the risks of the project, right? It's always part of our KPIs. What about the impact of our work to society, the impact of our work on the environment? And that has to be looked at as a success criteria for the project as well. It can't just be what's in it for us, it's what's the impact to everybody else.
That makes sense. We have another question coming in. Okay, this is from participant 576. What is your best practice in embedding carbon footprint in PRINCE2 when traveling is a significant part of it? Interesting question coming out of the COVID situation.
That's a good question. So, in our line of work, travel is inevitable, right? And I always say you can't punish yourself for living in today's world when you're trying to create tomorrow's. Obviously, I fly places. What I personally do is I use a service that I actually plant trees, but can't just go plant a tree in the park. It's not going to work. You have to actually plant regenerative forestry. So I work with an organization that actually does that for me. So whenever I take a flight, I tell them what the carbon footprint of the flight is, and they then plant those trees in the region that I'm going to. So it's actually quite helpful. And I don't have it offhand, but I can share with you guys later what that is.
I've seen that before. A lot of organizations are doing that with tree planting initiatives globally. I've interviewed some companies that do that, which is a great way to kind of offset that carbon footprint. And I think there's other ways too, if people look into that as well. And more will be coming. This is just a question I thought of right now, but we have a global audience here. And I'm sure you're well aware in 2024, we're going to have more regulations when it comes to sustainability, carbon emissions reporting, which could be one of the reasons that this topic is growing in interest and concern. Since you've been kind of the expert in this field, I mean, what is your opinion in terms of these new regulations, particularly ones that are coming out of the EU, and how this is going to affect sustainability management?
That's a fantastic question. So this isn't only affecting the EU, it's affecting everyone. In the US, the SEC is looking at this as well. The SCSB just came out with all these new regulations. So it's affecting everyone. And even organizations who are based in other countries who do business in the EU also have to comply. And so what's happening is these ESG disclosure requirements, which are outside in, your companies are being told, disclose what you're doing on environment, social impacts, and also for governance. And they're struggling because they don't have the data behind it. They can say adequately, here's what we want to do. In Australia, at the end of last year, the government sued the top 200 companies in the country saying, we believe you're greenwashing, and it's up to you to prove to us that you're not. Well, how do you do that, right? So you can pull data from operations, but if you're heavily projectized, where does data come from? It comes from projects. So what we've been doing is helping organizations understand what is materiality in projects, what belongs in a materiality report for ESG or sustainability that you can hand over as verifiable data. And that's really critical. And project managers, we're not trained that way, right? We're not taught create data for external reports. It's usually stakeholder reporting. So how do we do that? We use our P5 standard, and we've mapped in all the ESG frameworks. So that way, just by doing your work as normal, the reports that you create can be used as materiality reports for ESG disclosures, thereby satisfying the EU's requirements. I know I said a lot there, but basically,
no, I get it. That's interesting. It makes it easier.
Yeah, I mean, we're working with a large
Yeah.
oil and gas company right now, and they were struggling, and now they've integrated it. It's streamlined, and it's working flawlessly for them.
That is so great, and it'll be interesting to see how that that is. I don't know the reaction from the government regulators in terms of them saying, this was easy for us to understand what you're doing. Going forward, we do have a question from a participant related to this topic. Participant 413 has asked, have you seen an increase in ESG requirements as a project KPI?
No. And, it's funny. I've been beating this drum now for a few years, saying, guys, this is coming. And everyone's like, yeah. But when it hits, you're going to be freaking out. That's the reality. These disclosures, when they hit the company, the C-suite goes, okay, what do we do? And they start looking at places to pull data from, and they go, okay, operations, we have yours, but we're heavily projectized. What are we supposed to do? And that's where they're struggling. And we need to find ways to do this. Otherwise, they're going to get sanctioned. They're going to get sued. They're going to be paying heavy fines. And it's really not that much work to do it. The big challenge is that if you have an ESG disclosure and no sustainability practice behind it, that's where you're in trouble. And so we're trying to bolster the project management organizations by embedding sustainability practices so that way they can easily meet these needs.
Okay, we just got a couple more questions. I'm sorry if anyone put them in, I didn't see that first. This is from participant 790 for Joel. This person says, I see the P5 guide in the handout of the session. Are there any plans to provide PRINCE2 trainers with exercises in which P5 aligns with the new PRINCE2 7 that includes sustainability as one of the controls? This is from Manfred from Curacao.
Hi, Manfred, my old friend. Good to see you. So we've had some discussions with PeopleCert. I'm not in those discussions, but I think there is some movement. But I think that we can definitely work out a way to embed the new P5 into PRINCE2. It should not be that hard. I know you're also brilliant, so you can probably help us out too.
It's good when our there's and people know each other. Okay, especially when they're from all over the world. Okay, this is another one for you, Joel. It says, could you elaborate on the P5 standard and how it could help a PRINCE2 project manager in managing sustainability?
Sure. So what we've done is, to give you some background. So I helped write the UN SDGs. And the challenge with those is that they do not address root cause of why these SDGs exist in the first place. For example, number one is no poverty, right? I think everyone agrees poverty is not a good thing, but the SDG does not say, here are the root causes, and here's how you address them. It just says, end poverty. Well, how, right? So what we've done is we've mapped specific practices in our standard that align to each SDG. And so what we do is we have 49 different elements, and they're broken up under environmental, social, and practice, economic practice. And then the project manager takes a business case or project charter, if you use those, and takes the requirements and starts looking at impacts. What is the impact of the work the asset will create? And what is the impact of our project management practices using 5 different lenses? We use product, so the asset, the servicing of that asset, and then on the project management side, efficiency, effectiveness, and fairness. And we looked at all 49 lenses or 49 elements from those perspectives. And doing so, you can then score how bad is this or how bad could this be? And then if it's a really bad score, you could then create mitigation plans, create action owner items, assign them to different people to work on, work with sponsors to remediate those. There's lots of ways to improve, and then creates a report at the end saying, here was where we started, here's what we did to change it, here's the outcome, and here's how much better it got. And that right there is the materiality that these disclosures really need. And to prove the benefit of why sustainability is so important, it shows how much better the project becomes. It's a good example, right? A wind farm in Sao Paulo, right? several years ago, Siemens put one in there. And green energy, great, but they didn't hire local people to actually do the work. They didn't source any materials locally. Ongoing maintenance was done by their office in Germany. So really not a sustainable project, only sustainable energy at the end. To us, the entire project lifecycle must be sustainable, meaning you're hiring local staff, upskilling them, having them do the work in their own country, right? Those types of things are very important. So when we look at a project, we look at all these different aspects and go, how can we make this as sustainable as possible? Are we infringing upon indigenous rights? Are we looking at equality? All these different things.
That's such a great point, because it's sustainability across the board, from everything we do, like look for local solutions to reduce emissions. That makes sense. We do have another question. This is from participant 979 asking, are project managers taking into consideration the synergies between the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals, SDGs, and ESG?
No. So I love this, right? I always go into an organization and we say, we support the SDGs. And I go, how? And then they go, we believe in them? And so for project managers, it's really hard to take any single one of them, or there's 169 targets and goals under those SDGs. So when you look at them, they're not really designed for us. They're designed for countries, right? And they're always asking for public sector engagement on those. Well, what does that mean exactly? And to me as a project manager, what does that mean? And so it's hard to take what we do day to day and map that to an SDG. But in the P5, we've done that for you. So you can look at each element and it says, by doing this work, you've contributed to this SDG and target. It's all laid out for you. So the ones that have used the P5 can easily now say, I understand my impact with SDGs, as opposed to this nebulous 17 icons that I don't know what means to my work, if that helps.
It does. It does. More questions, Joel. This is a big topic, as we predicted. Participant 741. Sustainability itself has been undergoing definition changes. For example, more efficient engine design to extend petroleum resources, coal, nuclear plants, squeezing out more from every unit, thereby being more sustainable. But these are still being ditched for cleaner, he puts that in quotes, energy sources like wind and solar. Project management standards, PMI/PRINCE2, or even Agile Scrum all define a sort of start and end. How do both of these tie together? Okay.
Wow, it's a deep question. So
do your best on that one.
I'm going to be a bit of a rebel here. And I see projects as being cyclical, right? When you manage a project and it comes to completion, that asset lives on and has more projects associated with it, right? It never really ends. We're taught to be in this linear initiate to close and we're done mindset and you move on. That really doesn't work. For example, my lovely iPhone here, how many iterations of it has there been? The project never ended. It keeps going. It's always working on the next thing. And so to tie back to your question, sustainability has undergone a lot of different names. I mean, the green movement, for example, and it's kind of on a spectrum, actually. The green movement really wasn't sustainable because it only focused on environment, and we have all these social problems as well and economic issues. Sustainable itself actually isn't sustainable. If you think about the word, it means to sustain. But if we'd gone back to the 80s and sustained what we had in 1984, maybe we wouldn't have all these issues with climate change. But if we sustain what we have today, that's not sustainable for humanity. We have to actually go into regenerative practices and regenerate our ecosystems and our businesses so that way we can actually become sustainable in the future. I know that sounds kind of strange, but who likes the way things are today? Nobody, right? We have to go back and fix what we broke while still moving ahead. So that's why sustainable practices in projects is so important, so we can understand what impact we're having while trying to create new products and services.
Well, speaking of broken things, this is our next question from participant 434. With the current economic situation, what is the cost implication for running a sustainable project?
All projects are different, so it's hard to just pin down a number. But from what we found, when you develop a project and you don't include sustainability, the risks you face by not doing so far outnumber any investment in sustainability that can be put into the project. Because when you look at what happens when something fails, or when a risk happens and you go, oh, there's an oil spill, or oh, there's a flaring event, or there's contamination, who has to clean it up. That's extra cost, not part of your project budget. If you can plan ahead and think, okay, are there going to be any off-gassing? Is there going to be any contamination? What do we do when that happens? And you budget for that. That's much more cost-effective than the latter version.
Okay, that's a good question. We've got, somebody says they have two questions. Participant 47. The first one, are there other frameworks like PMI, PMP, or IPMA also already including sustainability? I'll let you answer that first, and then I'll give you their second question.
So full disclosure, I was former president for IPMA in the US, and IPMA has the Project Excellence Baseline, which has a sustainability model, which is great. So I'll say that. ICB talks a little bit about it. I think the next version will have more. So I can't speak to that a whole lot because it's not being written yet. But yes, they do have a focus on sustainability, and I've helped them with that a little bit. PMI, they have an ESG resource site. We're actually partnering with them to help develop new things, and they actually advocate for our GPMB certification. And actually, if you're a PMP and you're going to renew, there's a portal, and when you get to that portal, it says recommended certifications. It's ours, and so they encourage you to take our course to help you become a green PMP. That's actually a new thing they're working on. So yeah, there's inroads, and that's why I think it's so important that the community, the project management community, work together on this effort, because it's such a huge problem we have worldwide that it can't be one organization doing it alone, right?
Yeah, no, it's true. Second part of their question. And what should be the next step regarding sustainability and project management and its frameworks?
The next step is that you adopt it. It doesn't cost anything. It's just understanding things a little bit differently and looking at the way we deliver projects a little bit differently. It's taking a more holistic approach, and not to be all, hug the trees and kiss the butterflies. This is the reality of our world. I want my grandkids, if I have grandkids, to be able to enjoy the same things I have today. Last year, the river dolphin went extinct. Every year we've lost 10% of our elephants in the past decade. What's going on with our planet? We have to be able to take this responsibility, because we are the one profession that delivers change. And so if we change the way we deliver change, we've solved the problem. And that's really on our shoulders.
Yeah. That makes sense. One of our participants asked, what is SCG, and then someone else answered Sustainable Development Goals from the UN. So it's good when our participants talk to each other. All right, here's another question from participant 701. How can we apply process innovation in project management?
You mean in the context of sustainability, or can they?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that all depends. I mean, we have prescribed some processes that we encourage project managers to adopt, and have identified benefits that you can realize if you do so. If you take a look at the P5 standard, you'll see that we say the project team should, and take into consideration X, Y, and Z. And so if you're looking at your project processes, you can actually pull some of those and include them, and then tie them back to a specific kind of benefit. So that's what I recommend.
Okay, and from participant 364, have you got any examples of quick wins that project managers can implement into their processes now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think at each phase gate, do a P5 impact analysis. And all you have to do is just go through each element. And we actually have a spreadsheet on our website you can download. There'll be a new version coming out tomorrow. But basically, you just do almost like a risk analysis, but it's actually an impact analysis to understand the impacts of your work and what might happen if you do that. You score it, and then you remediate it, and problem solved. So, but we give you all the things to look for. So you're not thinking, oh my gosh, there's so many things. Do I look at environmental issues, and what ones do I look at? Do I look at social issues? We have them all done for you, and we've tied them to all the frameworks in the world. So it ties back to all your GRI reporting, your ESG reporting. If you do UN Global Compact reporting for your companies, you can hand that all off. So it all ties in together.
Okay, another participant 430 has asked, do you think that to do a sustainable project with PRINCE2, we must give more importance to change management?
Yes, absolutely. So I've had many projects that I've been involved with over the years where the project is completed, the organization isn't ready to adopt it. right? And so it's important that the project organizations are working with the end client or the business to ensure that the change can be adopted and integrated, because otherwise we're just kind of spinning our wheels. And that goes with anything, but especially with sustainability, because what we find is that the strategy for sustainability at the top, right? The C-levels executives saying, we want to be net zero by 2050. We want to have all these different KPIs put in place. And the project organizations go, what does that mean to me? What do we have to do? And they go, good luck. Do it, make it happen. There has to be a working relationship with change management to say, if we take this change in the project and it gets integrated, how can the business benefit and how can the change be adopted? And what impacts will that have on the business? It has to become more seamless. This is where that whole strategic project management focus has to come into play. We can no longer be command and conquer and hand it off and move on. Now it's a working relationship with change management.
Yeah, it seems like and every parts of the different organizations have to work together to make this happen, and there has to be improved communication and just project planning from beginning to end, and everybody that's involved being really looking towards the same goal. And speaking of other areas, we have another question from participant 481. How do we include sustainability processes within the R&D projects?
R&D projects are projects. We just rolled off of one. It's a hydrogen project. It was the R&D project, and we were consulting on this to assess it. And we look at it like any other project, because what happens is if you do the R&D project, and you're able to embed sustainability practices, it helps you, one, to sell it, because oftentimes businesses look at it and go, okay, well, is it profitable? You did the R&D, is it profitable? Now you can say, it's profitable, maybe not as profitable as we first thought, but here are the other benefits. We can reduce our carbon footprint by 30%. We can use less energy in this, that. There's other ways to look at benefits than just profit and loss. And that's how a lot of R&Ds get funded to become actual projects, right? It's about expanding the benefit scope. And that's really a good benefit. I said that twice, benefit.
That's great. We have a couple more questions. I think some of these we touched on a little earlier, but maybe we can take a deeper dive. So this question is from participant 413, asking, do you have examples of successful projects using green project management? I would imagine you have many examples of that, but maybe you just want to share one.
I do. And I'll say this. I know this is a PRINCE2 forum, so I want to bring it back to PRINCE2. I know that this organization uses PRINCE2. I don't have their project plan, so I couldn't look at all the details, but I do know there was a project, our project of the year, actually 2 years ago, was set in Vietnam, specifically in Hanoi. And there are two rivers that flow through the Set and the Nagu River. They were some of the most polluted waterways in Southeast Asia. This organization was set to build a high rise and was going to use recycled water in the building. And they realized that the river was so filthy that they just couldn't do it. So they said, you know what? We're going to expand our scope. We're going to clean up the river as part of our project, even though it's not going to bring us any benefit. We're going to do it anyway. That way we can make use of the water. And when they did that, the water quality became so clean, they were able to build all this new infrastructure around there because the city went, wow, now we have a green space. So it became this brand new hub for innovation just by making one small change. And that's what we're talking about. It's not just about deliver the asset. It's about change. And how can we create a sustainable world by delivering sustainable projects? There's a lot more impact that we can drive than just the asset itself.
Makes sense. And you had talked a little bit about greenwashing. I'm pretty sure most of our attendees are familiar with it, but I was wondering if you could first define it, because it's definitely a topic that's coming up a lot lately. And the question from participant 635 is, how would you go about ongoing greenwashing? He says that I deal with this with many suppliers, and sometimes trust, that's in quotes, is not a sufficient tool to check compliance to sustainability requirements. So let's talk a little bit more about greenwashing and how we deal with that.
Yeah, sure. So greenwashing is a problem. And it has been for many, many years. You can go to the grocery store where you live and you find eco-friendly. But when you look at the label, you go, certified by who and against what criteria, right? It's just a label. And so greenwashing is when you stamp a label on something saying it's sustainable. But you have to look at, by what standard did they follow, who accredited it, what processes did it follow. And specifically in your suppliers, there are ways to ensure that they are, doing what they say they do by just giving them policy to follow. Greenwashing policy, we require that you provide evidence of how you were assessed and how this is eco-friendly. If not, we're going to dock you points, or we won't hire you. So we have to hold our suppliers accountable. And if you start working in sustainable supply chains, that really helps, because there's some good practices there, and we teach that in our course. But ultimately, we have to start looking at our suppliers, and not just tier one, it's all the way through the value chain. Because oftentimes suppliers will have subcontractors that they don't really hold to the same standards, and they're saying, yeah, we're green, but our subcontractors, not so much. So it has to be all the way through. Because what happens is, if you don't, and there's a problem, that ends up on Twitter or X or YouTube or something. We had a client that, this is a couple of years ago, we were assessing the organization, and we said, do you have a policy for underage workers? And they go, well, of course. They can't. It's illegal in our country. I said, okay. But having just assessed a project in the organization, we learned that a subcontractor brought a 12-year-old on site doing heavy lifting. And we asked the project manager, what did you do? We told them to take him off site. Did you fire the vendor? Did you sanction the vendor? Well, no. Do you have an audit practice in place to ensure this doesn't happen again? No. So your policy, you're not even following it. There's the problem, right? We have to be doing all this.
Yeah, and planning ahead, so it's not just a reactive thing where people are in a crisis mode and scrambling like that. That's a good point. I want to bring this back a little bit to PRINCE2. My question is, can you discuss how the flexibility of the PRINCE2 framework can be tailored to tackle the diversity of issues encountered in sustainability projects? Sorry.
So I think the beauty of the PRINCE2 framework lies in its inherent flexibility, right? PRINCE2 offers a structured approach. It's not prescriptive, allowing for adaptation to diverse challenges, especially those prevalent in sustainability projects. In addressing these issues, I would propose introducing a dedicated sustainability theme within PRINCE2. This would ensure sustainability considerations are integrated into every phase of the project to optimize this adaptation. I think you could even leverage our P5 or develop something new. It's fine. But I think this combination of the two, PRINCE2's flexibility with a sustainability theme, would offer a much more tailored solution to the multifaceted challenges that sustainability brings and affects the project management. If that makes sense.
It does. New question from participant 409. How about program management framework MSP integrate with P5? Not sure.
That's a great idea.
That makes sense. Okay, you got it. Okay.
No, that's a great idea.
I wasn't sure if there was a verb missing. Okay.
So, and actually, we've been talking to Steve Jenner a little bit about that. How can we make this work? We do have a MSP-like solution, but I think it would be a fantastic opportunity to actually embed it into MSP. So we're actually talking about what that would look like.
Okay, great. Let's talk about the scalability of PRINCE2. How does it adapt to various scales of sustainability projects from small to large? And if you have any examples.
Sure. I think one of the standout features of PRINCE2 is its adaptability, right? The methodology is inherently designed to be tailored to suit the project environment, allowing it to fit unique needs of any project, irrespective of its scale, right? This flexibility is especially valuable for projects that embed sustainability, which can range from small community initiatives to expensive global mega projects. I think whether you're adjusting the depth of processes or modifying themes, PRINCE2 ensures that the approach aligns with the specific scope and requirements of the endeavor, including sustainability. I've always felt that the most valuable of the PRINCE2 principles with respect to smaller, let's say, community initiatives, as an example, is that of lessons learned, right? There's a wealth of sustainability data and experience that can be gathered and shared for greater benefit through the use of existing lessons learned report templates that's currently not being captured and shared. I think that's one area that can really stand out.
That's interesting. We have another question from participant 790. PRINCE2 has integrated sustainability, but not as a theme. These are now called practices. The word sustainability is in the manual 174 times as one of the controls. PRINCE2 will be available from September 4th. So more of a, I guess, statement than question.
That's my birthday, so hopefully it's good.
Yeah, it's coming up, right?
Yeah.
That's great. I just want to also encourage our audience that we do have additional resources in the handouts tab. These are great resources. Dr. Carboni is really the leading expert in this field. So this is an excellent opportunity to read his work and to ask him direct questions. So I encourage you, we have 20 minutes left. So please keep sending your questions. These are all terrific. Okay, we may have covered this, but I think, any more examples and stories are really fascinating, and it brings this all to life to people. So I was wondering if you can share a real world case where PRINCE2 methodology played a key role in a successful sustainability initiative.
So I think I mentioned a little bit about this earlier, but while I haven't directly overseen a sustainability initiative using PRINCE2, its principles are well suited for these projects. Given PRINCE2's emphasis on tailored solutions and stakeholder engagement, it's been applied in sustainability initiatives worldwide. For specific real-world example, PRINCE2's official channels, I think, or case studies would be the best resource for that. But yeah, I know that they exist.
That's great. Someone had asked earlier about the challenges. I also want to know, since you've been in this field for a while, and you've worked with governments and organizations, do you find that you're getting the same sort of challenges, or as time goes on, new ones are coming up in terms of quantity, different types? These are the types of things I'm just curious from your overall experience. Like, we had more challenges 10 years ago than we do now, or we have more now than we did 10 years ago.
The challenges are different. 10 years ago, it was, I don't know if 10 years ago, the most common thing we heard was, it's not time yet. Well, it's not now. When is it time, right? And now it's, we feel like we're behind. It's like, I was here 10 years ago. What's going on? But I think that organizations are trying to understand what this means to them, right? They're trying to understand the impact of their work. They're trying to become for-purpose organizations, not just for profit. They're trying to redefine, what diversity, equity, inclusion means to their work, to their business, and how it fits the projects. And there's a lot of things to work on. And now they're being hammered with, ESG disclosures. Tell us what you're doing, otherwise you're in trouble. And as I talk to CEOs and CSOs and CFOs, they're freaking out. They don't know what to do. And so this is where I think projects have a great opportunity to transcend where we've been sort of the basement for the longest time. Now we can go to the boardroom and we can stand up and say, we have strategic initiatives we can do that can make these changes and be put in the forefront. We can share them with the public. We can put them in your ESG reports and we can solve these problems. I think that's what we're seeing now is project organizations being looked at for help on strategy.
Yeah.
10 years ago, that was not the case.
Do you find that you're getting a better reception from the C-suite when you're talking about all these issues?
Absolutely. I have yet to be told we don't want this, which is great. What we are told is we want this, but we don't know how or how to engage you or how this works. So work with us, and then it takes time. But everyone knows this, it's important. Everyone knows that this has to be done. It's about figuring out how to make it work within the complexities of that organization. Because I love it when organizations say, well, we're special. Everyone's special, honey. We get it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's true. Everyone does think they're in a unique spot, and you've dealt with so many organizations. And it's interesting because your perspective, you're working with private organizations, but you're also working with government, which notoriously has a reputation for working at a slower pace. This is just a question for me. I mean, how do you adjust your planning for these different types of cultures within these corporations or within a government?
So I worked for government for many years, so I understand the red tape. I often say working with governments like working with a sloth on crutches. Just expect it to not go very fast. But also, big corporations move slow too. There's a lot of red tape. So it's almost the same. There's just a lot more paper with governments. I find that the big problem with governments, maybe not federal, maybe local, regional, is that they're stuck in this is how we've always done it mentality. And that world worked for the 70s and 80s, not for 2023. And so they're having to figure out, how do I get things in real time? How can I be transparent? How can I be disclosing X, Y, and Z? How does this work? And how can I really serve the people? And that's really the challenge that we're facing is you have the whole political space and then the operational space that supports it, and they're often at odds. So how do we actually get the job done? We like getting in there and figuring out, how do I make the politician look good by doing the right thing, right? And that's really how we get more traction.
Boy, and that is going to, if any time is that going to be relevant, than now going into 2024, the biggest election coming up. I can only imagine things are going to get more political. But we do have a question from another participant, and I encourage our audience, we have 14 minutes left. This is the great opportunity to get your question directly answered by the premier expert in this field. Our participant is 413, asking, would you label a project as being managed sustainability, or would it just be something you do as if it's the norm and not an add-on to the project?
Thank you. My goal when I launched this organization out of my bedroom in 2009 was that we would basically put ourselves out of a job at some point, because it shouldn't be an add-on. It should just be how we do projects. And we're starting to see that happen. We don't want to go away, obviously, but we want to see projects adopt sustainability as just its ways of working, and it's just natural. We've had innovations over the past 100 years. I think from the 50s to the 80s, projects and the core practices that were built, the Gantt charts, I'm spacing here, but all the core aspects were, how do we define and develop efficient ways of killing people? Because it was done for militaries, right? They had the most complex project management practices out there. And now it's, how can we best serve the people? How can we best serve the environment and ensure that we have a long-lasting planet for us to be able to thrive on? And when we take that mindset and apply it to our work, we have to look at the impacts of our work. That's the biggest important thing to talk about, is impact. What is our impact?
Yeah.
And when we can clearly define that and understand that, then we can manage to it and solve the problems. And that's has to be integral to how we do projects, not just a bolt-on.
Okay. Question from participant 915. How does PRINCE2.7 affect us with version 6?
I'm afraid I can't speak to that.
Yeah, I asked them to clarify. Okay, participant 915, maybe just retype your question a little bit more with a little more clarity. It'll be great. In the meantime, another question from participant 934. In your opinion, how deep knowledge should a project manager have? I guess, how much deep knowledge should a project manager have about sustainability in order to manage sustainability in a project?
So that's a good question. There's capability and capacity, right? I think it's important to understand the issues that exist, but ultimately, you can follow the process. There's knowledge, skills, and ability, and obviously you want to have all three, and having a core understanding of what the problems are important, right? It's just like when you take on a business case from an organization, you want to know, what are the benefits, right? What is it you want to actually achieve? I know what you told me to build, but what do you want to see happen with this? That way you can better understand how to deliver the project. Similarly, if you're working on a project and you want to address sustainability, you have to know what's the outcome, right? If you're building an oil rig, is there going to be water impact? Are we going to be, is there going to be a spill? These types of things. So I think that it's really important to have a basic understanding of sustainability. Now, you don't have to go get a PhD in it, but a basic understanding. And in our course, we actually have a whole module on the basics. But then more importantly is putting the tools in the hands of people that can use them. And they have to be easy to understand, not too complex, and doable. And when you see how it works, it actually teaches you in the process, because you get to learn all the different 49 areas that are important, and how to manage them. And when you can do that, you actually kind of become an expert, which is kind of neat.
That is great. I just want to also encourage people to keep asking these questions. We have about little more than 10 minutes left. And also, if you're just joining us, we have excellent handouts that are available, including blogs and articles from Dr. Joel Carboni, who is the leading expert in this field. And we're talking about PRINCE2, and we're talking about sustainable project management, which is only a subject that is growing in interest, in demand, whether it's from private corporations, for governments. We're facing at late 2023 now, the SEC, Dr. Carboni mentioned this, and we're all sort of waiting to see what they're going to say about ESG regulations. They say they're going to let us know by the end of 2023. Well, we've got 4 months, so let's see what happens with that. We're also noting that in Europe, new rules have been adopted. And we're going through the process of that in terms of regulations in the EU, but 2024 will have more standards in terms of reporting. So sustainability is just going to grow in terms of how it's going to be thought about in project management, how it's going to be regulated, what kind of disclosures are going to be required. And I would think, of course, the penalties and the recognition of the dangers of greenwashing, that's all going to be exposed further as well. So this is a great opportunity to kind of get your hands around this topic, specifically with PRINCE2. So I'd love to encourage the audience to ask more questions. Also, a reminder from one of our moderators, Cody. He is asking, and I really would encourage this if you can, to please take a second and fill out our survey. On the last webinar we did, we got great interaction with comments from the survey. These are so helpful for us putting these webinars together. So jump on that link that Cody posted and post your comments, your feedback for this presentation, for Dr. Carboni, for this question and answer period, whatever it is you think. What's wonderful is that we have a global audience, so we get the perspective from around the world. All right, and as speaking of which, we have another question from participant 915. They say, so I believe there are, I think this says, no added things on version 7, which are not on version 6. Is that a call for us to redo, or these webinars are sufficient? That's the question.
I don't think, is that for me or?
I think so. It could be more for the Prince thing. So yeah, we'll put that one on hold. Participant 915, feel free to maybe rephrase that. We will repost it. I also want to remind everyone that you should definitely check out this blog that Dr. Carboni posts. We have the link up there. It's blog.greenmanagement.org. That's his organization. He's posted blogs and lots of writings. There's lots of information that's free for you to access to learn more. And we just got a question. Okay. We know that it's from participant 635, and just in time, we have 7 minutes left. We know that every project has its end by definition. How in this case, oh, that one just disappeared. How in this case assures that sustainability will maintain after the project closure phase? Does building awareness during the project phase help? That's a good question. What happens when it's over? How do we keep it going?
It does. And this is up to the project team to ensure that, first off, whatever sustainability considerations were put into the project are shared, right? And when you do the handoff, that formal handover should include all the challenges you had, all the remediations you did, and what you did to ensure the project was sustainable. But also from a design perspective, you should be designing sustainable assets and working with the project owner to ensure that asset or that product service is as sustainable as possible ongoing. Because as I mentioned before, you can have a green product, but unless it's being managed efficiently and effective, then it's not going to work. One of the things we do in the P5 is that we look at the product and servicing. And servicing is after project closure. So you're planning for that servicing and ongoing maintenance and support forever how long that asset duration life cycle is. So you're trying to figure out what are the impacts post-life, right? And even to the point where when the asset life cycle comes to a close and it's being decommissioned, what does that look like? So you should be planning for that as well. I know that one of our clients, they're taking old oil rigs out in the Pacific Ocean, and rather than bringing them back on land and breaking them down and recycling them, they're sinking them into the ocean dead zones and creating reefs. And they've been able to take some areas where there's been no biodiversity and creating brand new ecosystems. And it's amazing.
It's fascinating.
So, yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean,
I saw that and I went, wow, that's really cool. And now that they're covered in barnacles and there's fish and it's also rejuvenating the ocean. So there are things we can do to ensure that the asset lives on beyond its useful life.
I wish I would have known about that. In my book, Taking the Heat, I write a lot about the loss of biodiversity as an impact of climate change and how it affects our health. It's good to hear about initiatives like this that are working to take something that could be toxic, like oil, like you were saying, and then turn it into a positive. Just want to read a comment from participant 934. Being a PRINCE2 and a GPM trainer, I can only recommend people taking a deep dive into the P5 standard. It's a great match with PRINCE2 7. Okay, thanks for that comment. And a question from participant 195. There is a connection to do between project and product lifestyles, I believe. Do you? Okay. Do you understand that one?
Wholeheartedly.
Okay.
Yeah, I do.
Okay, great.
The product life cycle includes the project life cycle, right? Because you can't have a product without a project. So we always look at total asset life cycle, which includes the project life cycle, the asset life cycle to end of life. So like cradle to cradle, not cradle to grave. How can you take that end of life and then repurpose it again? That's what we really focus on.
Okay, participant 915 wanted to clarify what they were referring to. But I don't see this as a question though. They say, I am referring to PRINCE2 7 and 6. The new things on version 7 require us with V6 to redo whole course of webinars that we attend sufficient.
I would direct that towards PeopleCert.
I think that's a PeopleCert question. I agree. And just for reference, I've gotten some messages to myself. Yes, I am on LinkedIn if you want to find me there for sure. Techstrong Sustainability is at ecotechinsights.com. I posted that in the chat. And one of the things that I do there is interview thought leaders like Dr. Carboni and on all types of sustainability and tech. And it's a growing area, as you know. So we have some exciting conversations with people from around the world that are working on green tech and amazing projects as well. And I have blogs there. And one of my more recent blogs was about those regulations that we're talking about. So please check out ecotechinsights.com. There's also a contact form if you want more information on that. And just one more reminder to fill out the survey that is in the chat. It will really help us to improve these conferences and webinars as well. We have time for one last question, which is mine, for Dr. Carboni. Where do you see the future of all this going? What do you predict as we go into 2024 and beyond with project management and sustainability?
I love seeing all these blog posts about the future of project management 3.0, all these things. But I think as we gaze into the future of project management, a few sobering realities and emerging trends kind of stand out. As of 2021, and this is from our own research, 37% of projects experience disruptions due to extreme weather events, direct outcome of climate change or climate chaos, as I call it. Hurricane Idalia is illustrating this point by causing immense disruptions in the U.S. Just this week. I think this underscores a dual responsibility for project managers. First, to recognize that our projects are directly affected by these environmental challenges. And second, to understand that the methodology and approach of our projects can be part of the solution. By embedding sustainability into our project strategies and diligently managing and mitigating adverse impacts, we can not only adapt to these challenges, we can also play a role in addressing the root causes of these disruptions and regenerate our world, because regeneration is the way forward.
That is such a great point. I really appreciate that. I think it's good also that we have a positive, despite all the challenges that we spoke of, that we have a positive, ending to this conversation. And I posted Dr. Carboni's organization on LinkedIn. I posted mine on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect. It's great to have a global audience. And it looks like we are out of time. Wow, that flew by. Dr. Carboni, Dr. Joel Carboni, thank you so much for your incredible insight and your time on this webinar. And thank you, participants, for joining us around the world for PeopleCert Skill Up Sessions, how project management helps sustainability. I think we've all learned a lot today, and I look forward to seeing your feedback in this survey. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.